Movies so bad, they're bad. Next on Retro Serial. Hey everyone, welcome to Retro Serial. I'm your host, D&C. I'm glad you could be joining me for today's program. On the program today, we have special guest Deryk from Flicks, Snacks, and Knacks. Check him out over on his channel. The topic today is movies so bad, not so bad they're good, but so bad that they're actually bad, movies that were ruined. But I don't want to get into an introduction. We talk about all that. We're just going to get straight to the interview. But before we do, if you're listening to this on podcast, please go ahead and give me a rating and review. That would mean the world to me, and share it on your favorite social media. If you're listening to this on YouTube or you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to like, hit that subscribe button, and hit the bell notification so you know when these things are available, and share it on your favorite social media so you can let the world know about the great content you're receiving here at Retro Serial. Also, if you're interested in supporting us, please head on over to our Patreon page, where right now we have 2 levels of support. Our first level is just a tip jar, which is $3 a month to say, hey, we like what you're doing over on Retro Serial and keep it up. And then the second level is our Cornflake Club, which is $5 a month. And with that, you get all podcasts and videos, with the exception of a few, with the exception of the live stream and maybe a few specially marked ones, one day in advance. I say that because just recently, unfortunately, Norm Macdonald died. And of course, a video like that is going to be timely. It had to come out at that time. So there are a few videos that are exception to that. But for the most part, you get all videos and podcasts one day in advance. And if you're listening to this on podcast only and you like what we're doing, please head on over to the YouTube page, where you're going to like what we're doing over there as well. And I do now have an Instagram page. It's retro_serial, just retro_serial. If you like connecting with people on Instagram, you can connect with me over there. And with all that said, let's just get right to the interview. So I just want to jump right into our topic today and formally introduce our main guest. As with me always is Thrashpondo. Pons, how you doing, Thrashpondo?
Never better, Ian. Good to see you.
And our special guest today is Deryk from Flicks, Snacks, and Knacks. How you doing, Deryk?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I think we've got a pretty, original sort of topic, kind of more of a specific topic than I've done in a while. So I'm pretty excited to talk about it and get into it.
As am I, Deryk. I'm going to do something here so we're kind of pinned all, so everybody can kind of see us more side by side. And here is the topic. And it's a topic I actually wanted to do for some time. And that is movies that are so bad, they're bad. Not movies that are so bad, they're good. And they became kind of a cult classic, but movies that are so bad that they're bad, that we actually don't like them, or they were ruined for us. Maybe movies that we were expecting to be good, we were hoping to be good, but they were really bad. But before we do that, Deryk, I would just like for you to just take a moment to tell everybody about your channel. I am interested in knowing, why did you start your channel? You do these really great movie reviews. They're short. What was the inspiration behind it?
Well, first of all, thank you. I guess I saw a lot of videos of people taking really deep dives into film, and those are the reviews I typically like to watch, because that's kind of how I view film, more from, I don't want to say philosophical standpoint, but I seem to read more into the metaphors than what I'm seeing. So I like to see those reviews, but I noticed there weren't a whole lot of reviews for people that just, kind of wanted a 2-3 minute, hit the main points. Is it good? Is it bad? What's somebody else's opinion on this movie? And especially that was true more so in the Asian film community. And so that's kind of where I really started, was reviewing Korean films, Japanese films, and K-dramas, that sort of thing. But it kind of started branching out into more and more and just kind of grew a little bit from there. I'm not a real big channel yet. I think we're getting close to 600 subscribers right now. But yeah, it's called Flick
So,
Snacks and Knacks, and we just take a look at movies and new movies, old movies. It doesn't really matter.
so what's your most popular one over there right now?
I gotta say, oh, I don't know. I think The Witch Part One, The Subversion, is a Korean film. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really good Korean film. I think it's from 2019. It's on Netflix, I think, but it did really well. A lot of the popular Korean films do better on my channel, it seems, and it seems like the ones that do worse are more so the ones that are new releases that a lot of people are pumping a video out of. It's hard to get into the algorithm there sometimes, but yeah, a lot of the more, I guess, obscure to American audiences, those films tend to average far more views for me, it seems.
And were you watching films like this before you started the channel? Was this like a thing you're like, hey, I'm really into these kind of foreign films?
You know, I think it started, I don't know, I gotta go back a little bit. I think it started in the early 2000s for me with a really awful film called The One with Jet Li.
Yeah.
But I absolutely loved that movie when I watched it, and from there I started getting into the Chinese, Hong Kong martial arts films, and it wasn't until about a couple years ago when I decided I wanted to really start looking at other countries and just kind of start hitting every country I could find that had a good cinematic presence in it. And a lot of the Asian countries have had a well-established movie community for a while, and South Korea was just kind of a country I decided I was going to check out some films for.
Mm,
And it's the one I just kind of fell in love with the most.
mm.
And that really, my passion for Korean cinema is what sparked me to make the channel, for sure. It's really what made me decide to go ahead and do it. Uh,
Mm.
and since then, I've expanded a little more, and I've kind of broadened, and I watch a wider spectrum of language films now. But that was the one that really started it all for me.
Yeah. I know of two Korean actors who, and I have to say as well, that that market for an American like myself is totally underrated. It's not something I generally watch or get into. I've paid attention to it a tad bit more since Lost came out, because as you know, there are two they were already famous Korean actors who were in Lost.
Yes.
So there's a little bit there with me. I know a little bit about it, but not a terrible lot about it. Um, Thrash, you have any questions before we jump into? You have any questions about his channel or anything like that before we jump into our topic today?
No, actually, in preparation for today, I actually jumped on your channel and watched some of your videos, and I'm a fan. In fact, I know you have 600, which is way more than I have, but you now have one more because I have also subscribed to your channel.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and me too, as well. So I have a couple of different channels, so I've subscribed on all of them as well. It's just about, the good thing about YouTube is really, and I've said this before, so please forgive me for repeating myself, is it's really kind of broke the market. You don't really have the idea that we're competing with each other anymore. It's you're only competing with time. As much time as you have as you can watch videos. It's not like if they're watching my videos, they can't watch your videos. Like it used to be on television. Like if you were watching Family Ties, you couldn't watch Growing Pains because they're on at the same time or something. You know what I mean? And it's just not like that anymore. So you can watch what you want when you want, and it's all about helping each other out. And your channel's bigger than my channel too, and I'm having you on the show, so that's awesome. I mean, it's going to help me out, I'm sure, when you share this on all your social media. So you're helping me as well, just being here. So thank you for being on the program.
A little
Oh, absolutely.
self-promotion there.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing you can do, especially now that YouTube does have a certain algorithm that tends to push those, the ones they want towards the top. It's not really a secret. But I've really always been a fan of, finding channels like mine that are smaller or my size, and really, helping promote them. And there's another one, Box Office Banter. I help moderate their Facebook page.
Okay.
I just like to, get my hand in a few different things just to help elevate the community as a whole, not just, my channel.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's much appreciated, I'm sure, by many platforms, by many channels. Okay, let's get into it, because I know people are going to listen to this and they're like, okay, when they can start talking about bad movies.
That's all the time we have today, folks.
Yeah, that's all we have. Well, we're going to see it. Goodbye, everyone. Deryk, so as a film critic, somebody who looks at films and, enjoys films and rates films, what is it about a film that makes it bad for you? Tell me, why would you say, you walk out of a movie theater, or you turn off Netflix or whatever it is, and you just walk out going, I really didn't like that movie?
Okay. Yeah. So I kind of have a basic system. I say basic. It has kind of 5 points to it.
Okay.
There's 5 things I look for that I think not every good film needs, but every great film needs. And that's, I have my notes right here. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So you need either a great story or great action.
Okay.
Usually, I mean, if you're going to go for a great action over a great story, you have to do something like The Raid, though. I mean, you have to really pull off just some crazy, action sequences with good camera work. And then you have to have a great cast, and it can't just be the lead unless, they're the only person in the movie. Good camera work, which could also probably be replaced with a good set or good location. If you're getting like on-set shots, like a movie like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where just every single shot is just this beautiful Californian untouched landscape, then you need really good camera work if you don't have something like that. A good pace, where you're not getting thrown too much at once and you're not dragging too much. And the 5th thing is you have to have a good director, or at least somebody who's passionate about the project and really wants to see it, come to its full fruition. And those are kind of the things I go in. I kind of break those down as I watch a movie. And it doesn't have to have all those things for me to walk out. I'm not going to walk out and say, wow, that didn't have every single thing I needed to have. That movie sucked. But, if it doesn't have all those things, I start looking at, okay, well, what didn't it have? How much did that affect the overall entertainment of the movie? Because, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to be entertained. And that's the main purpose, But I guess if I go in expecting a couple of those aspects to be extremely, extremely great in a film and they're lackluster or less, then I typically come out pretty disappointed. Or the basic things when they're not done right. When editing is really bad, I wonder what happened, because I feel like editing should be, it's not easy. I'm not saying taking away, a good editor's, job or anything. Editing is one of the hardest things that I've had to do for my YouTube channel. But I just feel like it's one of those things that if a movie is bad because of editing, then the editing was really, really bad in what happened, because it just gets choppy. A lot of films and their camera work, an action movie with terrible camera work will always get a bad grade for me too. So,
well, I want to get some examples of that, just on those 5. Those are good 5 points, and I'm already thinking of examples. But before we get too far down that rabbit trail, Thrashpondo, I want you to chime in as well. I want you to tell me too, for you, what is it that makes a movie bad? Like if you're watching a movie, or good or bad, that breaking point. What is it that's that breaking point for you?
Well, I'll open up with one thing that doesn't bother me as much as it does many other people, is, for want of a better term, production value. If a film has a very low budget but has heart, I'll forgive its lack of effects and its stellar scenery. What really a film has to have for me it has to have really two things. It's got to have a solid story, maybe not a stellar story, but it's got to have a story that I can follow and enjoy. Additionally, and when you mentioned cast, I was thinking of this. It's got to have engaging characters. If I don't have characters that I can empathize with and follow, they've lost me. I've already checked out. Now, that isn't necessarily even the hero. Sometimes the best characters are supporting characters. Sometimes the best character is the villain. But there's got to be somebody that I'm really riveted to. And if it doesn't have those two things, I'm already trying to remember where I've parked.
Right. And for me to chime in here, both of what you guys have said resonates with me a lot. And probably this would be a sub point under a good story. And that is, for me, it's a lot of it depends on the villain. Your story, in my opinion, in your movie, in my opinion, can only be as good as the antagonist. This is a big point for me. I don't know why. I mean, all these things are good points for me. And I'm thinking every time you're bringing up a point, I'm thinking about, oh yeah, there's a movie that did that and that sucked. And I hated that movie because of it. But one of the biggest things for me is when the bad guy gets a little too ridiculous. Really starts to bother me. And an example of this, as I said, was the Karate Kid Part 3. I love the Karate Kid Part 1. I love the Karate Kid Part 2. The Karate Kid Part 3 was bad for all kinds of reasons, but the main villain was just stupid. I mean, he was just like, it wasn't realistic. He wasn't a realistic kind of bad guy. He wasn't the bully that Johnny was, or the bad teacher that Reese was in the first one. And he wasn't the the privileged Okinawan kid and the guy with the vendetta in the second one. He comes off as this kind of ridiculous guy. I don't know if you remember the movie or not, but he's like, oh, cancel all my appointments. I'm going to make it my job to get in the revenge business. And it becomes ridiculous for me. But all those points that you guys brought up are good. And I'm chomping at the bit to talk about examples that I have in my mind. And I'm going to throw out one example that you said, and that is that you said, Deryk, and that's camera work. One movie that was absolutely ruined for me because I could not stand the camera work was the Bourne 3, Jason Bourne, the third one. And it was kind of a popular thing at the time to have that shaky camera work.
Yes.
But you couldn't see anything. And for somebody who's a martial artist like myself, I want to see the interaction. I don't mind, going from back to forward or whatever, and like maybe a little shake, but you couldn't see what was happening. And action was such an important part of the film that it just for me ruined it. I mean, I can't even really watch it. Because the story, I mean, it's an action movie, and you can't, it's like, it's an action movie, man. I mean, I want to see the action. I want the camera to shake so badly that I can't. They're shaking the camera because they're trying to make it dramatic and more realistic, like you're part of the film. But there's a point where they do it so much that you feel like you can't tell what's going on. You know what I mean? You can't tell what's going on, and it just ruins it for me. So those are my two examples, based on, and I could go on and on. I'm not gonna. Deryk, go into your 5 points. Take a couple of those and give me some examples of films that were ruined for you because they strayed from, what would make it good.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Bourne 3, because when I said that about an action movie has to have great camera work, I was thinking the Bourne series. It was the first thing that popped into my head. I was like, you have this great story, great actors, great directors. You have every other element you could possibly have, and just the worst camera work, when they're doing those hand-to-hand fight scenes. But let's see, going off of another one, and not really one of the 5 points that I necessarily made, but one that I think is important when you're looking critically at a film is originality. For instance, my favorite movie franchise of all time is Star Wars. I'm 29 years old, and my room is just everything Star Wars. I mean, everything in there has got to be decorated with something Star Wars. It's, Baby Yoda wall. I've got, it's just all sorts of stuff in there.
Got all
But I
kinds of
wanted to
stuff
leave that
back
one.
here. You can see
Yes,
Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars.
yes. I saw
My
that
Luke
over your shoulder.
Skywalker over
Or I
here.
see a lightsaber. Yeah,
I got a
very
few of them.
nice. That's awesome. And I wanted to leave Star Wars off of, my lists just because it's not necessarily original. It was taken from Akira Kurosawa's, oh, and now I'm running blank
Hidden
on the,
Fortress.
yes,
Hidden
the
Fortress.
Hidden Fortress. And so I kind of wanted to stray away from that, not because Star Wars isn't great, maybe not one of the best movies of all time, but I want to kind of stick to more original pieces. And one that isn't based necessarily on anything, but I think is kind of from the 70s, that I just could never watch because of how terrible it was Snuff. And if you haven't seen it, it was supposed to be like one of the next big slasher flicks. It came out right around the Halloween craze, and it was supposed to be just this awesome movie, and they marketed it, as going to be the next big slasher film. And so I'm going through my list of films from the era of watching them, and I'm like, this one's okay, this one's okay, this one's okay, and I get the Snuff, and I almost turned it off about 15 minutes in. I just couldn't watch it. It's literally, if you took an anthology series of all the worst cliches of the slasher flicks from those days, and you just made a movie, that's all that this is. And so it's almost a movie. I mean, it also has so many other things wrong with it in terms of just, bad acting. There's no direction. So basically, you could say it doesn't really have any of the five things that I have on my criteria. But when you told me, when you were asking about, bad films from, the kind of just this era, this generation, I was like, boom, Snuff. It was one of the first ones that came to mind. And it's probably because it hits all those terrible movie boxes for me. But, another movie that I think a lot of people like, especially people, more so these days, I think appreciate it, is a Sylvester Stallone film. And I'm a big Stallone fan. I actually think as an actor, he's underrated. I've seen him put on some really, really good performances. But Over the Top. And I know everyone wants, prime Stallone with a cutoff, doing something as manly as arm wrestling to be a really good movie. And I think so many people try to justify it in a lot of different ways. And that's one I just never, even as a Stallone fan, even as a fan of movies from the genre, and that, Eye of the Tiger, train sequences, and just all the cliches that you get, I just could never get through that one.
Well, it's such a limited audience grabber, who's really into arm wrestling. I mean, I know that there are people out there who are probably really into arm wrestling, and I'm not trying to offend any of them. And if Over the Top was your movie, that was your movie. But I mean, honestly, how many people were really into it? How many people are drawn to that kind of story? You know what I'm saying? Right. How many people are going, oh man, I cannot wait. And it's so obscure that, well, let me put it in the opposite way. Even people who aren't into boxing can kind of picture themselves as Stallone being a boxer. It's more connecting to a wider audience, even if people don't do boxing. Same with like Karate Kid. Even if you're not into karate, you can, you know what it's like to be bullied, or you know what it's like to be in a fight. You can kind of picture yourself. But the sport of arm wrestling is so niched down that it's hard to connect with anybody who really isn't connected to that sport at all.
Yeah, and, if you take a look at it, it's just to reiterate what you're saying too, is it's not about necessarily, the audience of the sport as much as it is like Rocky is so much more too. It's mainly a love story, and then, the other Rockies, they start watering down a little bit as you get down the line. And then Karate Kid, it's about this kid, this outcast, this whole other, other dramas and stuff going on. And Over the Top just felt too much of just an arm wrestling movie to
Yeah.
me.
Right.
It's like
Right.
just watch him beat some guys at arm wrestling, watch him flex, and I graduated high school at 140 pounds. I wasn't into arm wrestling.
You were skinny.
Yes.
Lucky you. I
Yeah.
was not. I was fat. Well, there was a couple things in there I wanted to say. We'll talk about and Thrash, please jump in anytime you want to jump in. I mean, on any of the stuff. And by the way, Deryk, when Thrash brings up his stuff, you jump in too if you've got something to say.
Of course.
Open conversation. But talk about a film, to go back to Star Wars, talk about a film that, as you know, was saved because of the editing. There's actually a whole nother film that existed very few people have seen, that's in George Lucas's like vault or something, that he's shown to very few people, and you can see very small clips of it, of the original Star Wars as it was going to come out, and apparently it was just a dud. It was just very slow paced, and it was the cutting of it that saved it in the
end. The whole subplot with Biggs, his best friend Biggs, which is what makes him really want to ramp up his decision to join the rebellion, that's all cut. That's why in that final battle sequence, when Biggs is shot down, there's a sort of da-da, and everyone's all emotional.
Like, who's that?
We have no connection to it because we didn't even know who Biggs was. Well, yeah, it's because that's on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think John Williams' score really did a lot for those movies too.
Huge.
The scenes that do drag, you could just do like almost a picture scene for 5 minutes and just play a John Williams score, and like I'd be entertained. I'd be like, oh, this is beautiful. Yeah. So I think that really helped get the franchise a foothold, at least with an audience, in terms of it, and helped with pacing, I'm sure.
And of course, he borrowed that from Leone, the idea good music creates good film.
Sergio Leone, maybe my favorite director of all time.
He's certainly up there.
Yeah.
He's certainly up there with me, too.
Thrash, give me some examples of films that you did not like because they didn't stick to what you had said, your points that you had made.
Certainly. I'll open up with one of my favorite bad films, I guess you'd say, one that I really like to dig into. Now, I tended to stay away from sequels because, by and large, sequels automatically are not as good as the original, with a notable exception, I think we all know. But I'm going to open up with Highlander 2.
Okay. I
really enjoyed Highlander 1. Wasn't the best film ever made, but it had a wonderful blend of action and story, as we've discussed. I thought Christopher Lambert was at his best. It didn't bother me that Sean Connery had a Scottish accent. He's great. The Kurgan is probably in the top 10 best villains in American cinema, if you ask me. He was just great. Clancy Brown is wonderful. That being said, Highlander 2 was a disaster. First of all, the premise, whenever a film takes its source material and throws it out the window, they've already lost me. Here's a franchise that has a great idea. There are these mystic, immortal warriors who are born into Earth at various periods and must await a quickening where they all get together and fight a battle royale where there can be only one, and then they issue a golden age. That's great. You don't have to tamper with that. In the second one, oh, no, they're actually fugitives who are on the losing side in a civil war in another planet. And they were all sent here to fight each other again for reasons unknown. Oh, and the principal character, coincidentally, is the main character in the franchise. Oh, and by the way, back on the planet Zeist, his name is also Connor McLeod. Why would he have a Scottish name on the planet Zeist? I'm watching this going, were you on acid when you made the movie? I left the theater. I was on a double date with a friend of mine. And I said to my friend, I don't know who they got to direct this movie, but did he even see the original? And he went, Bob, it's the same guy. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Also, Michael Ironside, who I think is great, by the way, been a fan of his since he was in V. He played it, remember talking about over-the-top villains. He played it so ridiculous. I couldn't even enjoy him as a good villain. And John C. McGinley, who again, a big fan, he had some of the best lines in the movie, but he was so underused. The whole thing was just it was just a train wreck. And again, horrible story that I couldn't follow. And no, and even the cast members who I liked in the first movie, I sort of tuned out in the second one. It lost me almost in the opening sequence. Apologies to anyone who liked it.
Yeah, I didn't like. I was rather young when it came out, and I watched it, and then I actually didn't like it later. When I first saw it, I was sometimes it takes me a while for it to sink in how bad a movie is. For example, I walked out of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, thinking, "Hey, this is a good movie." I liked it. I walked out, was entertained, whatever. And as the days grew on, I started thinking, you know what? That was actually kind of a silly show. I ended up being one of my least favorite shows I've ever watched all time.
It's so funny you mentioned that. When I saw Titanic in the theater for the first time, I was entertained. I worked in a video store at the time. When it came out, we put it on an in-store play. When you loop Titanic from open to close every single day, day in and day out, and you watch it over and over and over again, you're like, God, this is an incredibly flawed movie. How did I not notice all these flaws? Because you're so caught up in the story and the romance. But yeah, when you look at a movie academically, you can lose your love for it.
For sure.
That's so
for
true.
sure. Yeah. Have you guys ever have you had that experience, Deryk, where a show you thought you liked and then maybe you watched later and realized you didn't like it? Or can you think of?
Yes, several times, I guess. Mainly with things I probably should have known were going to be bad, like Power Rangers stuff, Space Jam stuff. The stuff that, like, when I was, about 8, that I really was coming out, and I was like, this is the best stuff that's ever been made. They'll never make anything better than this. And I go back, I tried to watch Power Rangers with my kids, and I'm like, oh, this is so bad. It's so terrible. I called my dad. I was like, I apologize, for all those Sunday mornings and that I made you turn on Power Rangers. But I'm trying to think. It does. One that I can remember really enjoying that when I went back and watched it, it wasn't very long ago either. I'm trying to think of what it was called now. But yeah, long story short, I think that's a problem with nostalgia, is as your imagination and your memories, good memories of a film fade, and you learn to analyze things.
Right.
But it changes. But I've also gone back and watched films that as a kid, I guess I didn't understand or get, and I watch as an adult, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But one, I can't believe I forgot the one I was trying to think of. We just talked about this earlier. The one, Jet Li.
Oh yeah.
That's one. Well, as a kid, I was like, this is just as good, if not better, than The Matrix. Look at this action, look at Jet Li go, this, all the special effects. And I watched it probably 3-4 months ago again. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle, but I made it through it.
So what was it about the one that you didn't like?
I think part of it is just the cliches of that time, not so much as a film itself as a standalone film. I don't think there's a whole lot critically wrong with it. The special effects from that time doesn't age very well. Special effects today isn't very good either. If you watch, in my opinion, in like the Marvel movies, I think that CGI is terrible. But the CGI is a little distracting. I don't like it when they have to pump like really fast paced adrenaline, instrumental hard rock metal music, or generic scratchy hip hop pop music over every fight scene. And
right.
The early 2000s were bad about that. So I think it was just more so the pacing felt incredibly off to me.
Mm-hmm.
I like the story and I love the action, and Jet Li is one of my favorite martial artists of all time. But I think it was more so just the aesthetic of the film, the way it's filmed, It's just like the typical things of that time. I don't think have really aged that well, even though they haven't been that long ago. I think
Yeah.
movies more so from like the 70s, 60s and 70s. I think those movies are starting to make a really big comeback. Oh, I've got this movie here, Curse of the Demon. And this is like a 57 movie. And I watched it not long ago and I thought, this looks like almost like an A24 film if it was filmed in black and white back in the day. So
Right.
I just really like the way that, we've kind of made a full circle. I think the movies from the 60s and 70s are more so what we're making now than what we were making even just 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, special effects can always kind of make or break a movie, especially if it's really hanging on it, or if it's really cheesy special effects. It can ruin it. It can really ruin it. Um, and to go back to your points that you made, one thing that kind of occurred to me about them is it's difficult to draw the line to where a film gets ruined. Is one problem bad enough to ruin a film? Is two problems of those five that you mentioned, for example, bad enough to ruin a film? It depends on how bad the bad point is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just slightly bad, the whole film can kind of be okay. Like Thrashpondo mentioned about maybe they don't have a great budget, but they've got a lot of heart and they've got good and everything else. But if the one point is really, really bad, you can have a good cast and they have good everything else, and one point can really ruin it. And that happens a lot with shows that kind of revolve around effects, because then if effect looks stupid and it looks really dumb, like if it's a monster movie and you're like, oh my gosh, that monster, and you cut away and it's a sock puppet, it doesn't matter if you got the best 8 actors, everybody's going to be talking about that sock puppet when they walk away from it. I want to say two things that ruin movies for me too. And they've been so bad, they've been bad. And one is, I can put up with a lot of stuff, but when people psychologically, when they don't act correctly, like a normal psychological person would act, like, like, why is that person doing that or whatever, that ruins a movie for me, kind of, because they don't act. You see that in a lot of like romantic kind of comedies, especially. You see like the main hero or, giving a speech that just kind of really wouldn't happen. And the other thing is over explanation of things that really bothers me.
For sure.
And bringing it back to Star Wars. So Star Wars 4, 5, and 6, 4, 5 loved, 6 loved up to the Ewoks.
Yeah.
I love them. I love the show. The 1, 2, and 3. I don't hate them. I like them, but I don't hate them like everybody else hates them. There were elements I hated, but I didn't hate them overall. The new ones I can't stand. I like the Mandalorian. I mean, that's great. I like the Mandalorian and Rogue One. Solo I thought was great, but the trilogy that I didn't like. But one of the things that really bothered me when episode 1 came out was the over explanation. And like the Force and stuff. Oh, it's
midichlorians.
Yeah.
Look, I'm doing blood work now.
Yeah.
I was looking at the screen going, no.
Yes.
No. Don't explain the Force. If you explain it, it goes out the window.
Yes. It's mystical. You just feel it. That's all it's supposed to be. You feel it. It is there. It isn't there, but
right. And then I agree. Yeah, the over explanation. And I did not hate episode 1. I didn't hate it. But that was one of those things that's like, man, well, how could you do that? How in the world? And in episode 3, kind of what ruined it for me was how quickly Anakin turned. It's not realistic that he's going from saving Padme to pretty much on the same day killing children.
Just
You know,
yeah, didn't even think about it. Just kind of
yeah, that's too that's I can deal with the fact that there's no such thing as lightsabers. I can deal with that. I can deal with that it's a space. I can't deal with the fact that he's acting psychologically inappropriate. You know what I mean? Like, just not, it's not realistic. That's just a line in
right.
the sand for me personally.
And if
Um,
it's like an art house style movie, I can see if you're trying to tell like a fairy tale or, some of the A24 films, the characters don't act like normal people would, but that's consistent, throughout the film and with how the story unfolds. But, in Star Wars or something like that, where you're expecting these, you're watching these people, they have a Congress, they're trying to make rational decisions. And and then all of a sudden, right, you have somebody do something like that. And you're just like, it totally sucks you out of the story. I completely agree.
yeah, yeah. What one story that like that you're talking that I would agree with, like if the whole story is kind of comical, you can do that. Like the Last Dragons that way. The whole story is kind of comical. And so I can deal with a comical bad guy and a comical good guy and people doing kind of crazy things. But when it's
It's a
supposed to be,
farce.
what's that?
Because it's a farce. May the farce be with you. It's not meant. It's a lampoon. It's not meant to be taken
Yeah,
seriously. So you can forgive the wackiness of it. I agree.
yeah, yeah. Okay. I want to move it to this question now. And this just kind of occurred to me because I'm going to tip my hand on something and I'll go first just to kind of set the groundwork. But I want to talk about a movie that either was critically acclaimed that everybody liked, but you couldn't stand.
Mhm.
Okay. And I'm going to go and everybody's going to kill me on this. They're going to say, oh, you just don't get it. And I've watched it more than once and I've watched it at different points in my life. Blade Runner. It's too boring. It's too slow. I'm sorry, Thrashpondo. I probably want
His
to
You
face is.
Judas. You quisling. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I look, man. I have tried to watch it over and over again. I've tried to watch it at different points in my life. Well, maybe I was too young and I was looking for something like Star Wars, and so now let's watch the new Blu-ray version. So for me, that's one that like everybody else really likes and talks about. And I just go, man, I don't get it. I haven't watched it in a good 10 years. I watched the new one. I thought the new one was great, but I don't, that old one, if the last time I watched it, I was like, even as an adult, it was just like, I can't get behind it, but that's me. Let's hear from you. Is there a movie that everyone liked and you're almost afraid? Yes, Thrashpondo, go ahead.
The English Patient. For some reason, I'm watching it. It's like Elaine in Seinfeld, where I don't get it. I mean, I thought the characters were narcissistic, elitist jerks. I thought the story just sort of meandered about. Ray Fiennes, who I think is great, I just wanted to slap him throughout. To be honest, I think the most interesting subplot was that with Jurgen Prochnow and William Dafoe, where he's the OSS agent who's captured and tortured and ends up in the field hospital after the war. I thought that was far more interesting. And the relation Julie Armand has with the English not a sapper. He's a guy who actually finds what the sappers do. He's an anti-sapper. He finds mines and booby traps and stuff. I thought the side plots were far more interesting than the actual main love triangle, which bored me to tears. And visually, it was stunning. I mean, they threw money at the screen. I mean, the production value was, double plus good. And everyone loved it. And it won, I forget, it did very, very well. And I'm just watching it going, what am I missing? So that was my I don't get it moment.
All right, Deryk, you're on. Can you think of one that maybe I put you on the spot? Maybe you got one right along
Oh,
back.
that's fine. No, I one popped into my head, and I think both of you have given really good examples. I agree with both of you so far. It seems to be a theme, I guess. I don't know. We're on the same wavelength of what kind of fits into that category of something you're just like, what am I watching? And this one's not too old. It's pretty recent, just a few years ago. I went to see it with my entire family, and it was critically acclaimed, and I think it still holds a pretty high score. But it's Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I'm a big Matthew McConaughey fan most of the time,
Yeah.
when he's not just when he's playing a role, when he's not just playing himself every time, but when he's playing a role, he's really good.
Yeah.
And he was great in this movie. He actually put on just a tremendous performance. Everybody in the movie did. But there's something about when a story, is grabs you in and they're doing this slow burn, and you're like, okay, well, that's a brave route to go, because if you're going to do a slow burn, that's fine. I love it. I'm in it for the long haul. Most of my favorite movies are slow, but you've got to pay it off at the end. It's got to be worth it. And Interstellar did just, I don't know, but floating around in space.
Yeah.
And then randomly happening to be in the right spot in all of space, which, I think most people know is pretty big.
Yeah.
But to get sucked into this black hole, and for these events to happen, and then also to get spat back out and survive. I was just watching it the minute that it showed that he was the one. Spoilers for it.
Yeah.
But when it showed he was the one behind the bookshelf while he was in this black hole, in this spectrum of space, and kind of when it tied that together, that's when I thought, oh my God, this is a comedy. And, and that, I'm not trying to be facetious. And to anyone that liked it, I'm always glad when something can entertain somebody. I would never try to take that away from them. That's not my purpose at all. But it's just, I just didn't get it. I didn't get it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that show. It had me all the way up. And I like what you said there too. In slow burn shows, you better have a good payoff. That is the deal with those, because you can get sucked into something and then at the end, and that was one of those shows that it's a perfect example of a great slow burn show. I was sucked into that movie. It really was. And it was the end that really, I feel the same way you do. It's just like, come on, give me the break.
Yeah.
He's the person pushing the.
Yes. Yeah. Just not, it's you've got to have a good payoff. I've watched a couple good slow burns lately. One of them, the new Nicolas Cage movie, Pig, is a very
I haven't
slow.
seen it. I haven't seen it.
And I won't spoil it because it's a new movie. I would never spoil something that quite that new.
Right.
But the end did it. I loved it. I loved the end. I loved the whole movie. And my wife hated the end. Said it ruined the whole thing for her. So, you do also have that where, some people might watch Interstellar and be like, oh, he's the one pushing the book. Yeah, that's the best twist ever. While we're sitting over here like, what is happening? So
right.
I don't know.
Right.
I do like that film is subjective, and I like that there's an audience for just about everything.
Yeah. I like twisty stuff. Stuff at the end, if it's done correctly, I think is brilliant. If it's not done correctly, it really messes
hit or miss, like
in
M. Night Shyamalan. You either get this awesome twist, this great masterpiece, or this what? How did they make this?
Speaking of Nicolas Cage, who, let's face it, is also hit or miss. He's done some great work. He's done some. Have you seen The Color Out of Space, and what did you think?
I
have not seen it. No, go ahead.
Okay, I have seen that. I actually really like that movie. I went into that's one of the few movies that before I watched it, I read a lot of reviews for, because like another thing that's hit or miss for me is Lovecraftian stuff. I love H.P. Lovecraft's writings, stories, or most of them. There's some, just like Stephen King, his books, even though I'm not a huge Stephen King movie person, his books are amazing. And that's kind of how H.P. Lovecraft has been for me. I love his books, but the movies are usually more hit or more miss than hit.
It's tough to translate.
Yeah, but that's a really good example of how to do something to Lovecraftian in a very modern setting. That there, it's one of those things. It's such an odd movie, and it's hard to explain, but it's. I can definitely see why there were people who didn't enjoy it. It's definitely out there, like a lot of Cage's recent work, but I've liked most of it. Like Mandy has kind of got the similar vibes, actually, and that's another kind of good one he's done. I think in 2017, but yeah, it's definitely hit or miss with Cage, with Crafty and stuff. But Color Out of Space was a really good movie, and I really like, not spoiling it again because I think it's probably one not a lot of people have seen. But the twist in it, or not necessarily the twist, but I guess what you come to realize kind of what is going on, what is happening to this family. I thought that the way they told that story, with not just the story in words, but mostly with facial expressions and colors, just like color lenses and different lighting, I thought it was really unique and really cool. I thought it worked out. I thought they did it like just as perfectly as they could have done, probably. I gave that movie, I think, an 8 out of 10 when I reviewed it.
Oh, cool.
Well, it's my favorite story by Lovecraft, and I've seen other adaptations, and they never quite get it right.
Yes.
And I haven't, pardon me, a chance to see this one, but you've given me more impetus to try to look at it.
Like I said, I've seen people who were like, that were kind of like how I was in Interstellar. They're like, what is this garbage? What is this a movie? And so it's kind of it's got very mixed reviews, but I would say they're more positive than negative. And I had a really positive experience with it. So I would recommend it, but I would also, if you're interested in that thing, but I wouldn't recommend it to someone who reads, Jane Austen or anything. But
Roger.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that ruins a movie for me is when things are a little too copycatty. I just gotta say that. Of course, we can all talk about the slew of Star Wars copycats that were out. There's that show with Molly Ringwald in it in '83, I believe. I don't know if you saw that movie or not.
One, Space Hunter.
Yeah, Space Hunter. That actually, unfortunately, that I should say that might even move into so bad that it's good again. So it might be a little bit out of our genre here, but that does kind of ruin it for me. You talked about that already, Deryk, the originality aspect. Or no, was it you, Thrash, that talked about the originality aspect?
It was Deryk.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. When you start getting, the printer, the Touchstone printer off of the Warner Brothers hit, they did a hit over at Warner Brothers. Now we've got to do one too that kind of emulates that. One of the things that happened with, and it moves us again into our more modern era, was with the movie Taken. I thought Taken was great. It was good. Very original, a great action. And then you had Stolen with Nicolas Cage, and you had another one with John Cusack, which I love. John Cusack's probably hands down one of my all-time favorite actors. But you had that, I forgot the name of the movie, but it was basically another Taken movie, kind of a thing. And it's just sometimes Hollywood or whatever, they can't help themselves. They just need that money. This like, we don't know when to stop. We just
cash grab.
Yeah, it's just a cash grab. That's one thing that kind of bugs me. Of course, there are some copycats that, like I said, like that Space Hunter was in the so bad it's good genre, but there were a few of them that happened that were just awful, just absolutely awful. I'm thinking of one, I can't remember the name of it, but it's about some kid that gets stuck on some pirate ship and they're trying to get him home. And it was just a remake of Star Wars. And does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I can't think of it.
The makeup was so bad. Well, he's got like this little bug that he's trying to capture. And then he gets onto this ship that these pirates are actually stealing. and it's an 80s show. And the bug is like the worst claymation that you can possibly imagine, that he's trying to catch and put in this thing, and he follows it into this ship. Then he happens to be in the ship when the pirates steal it. Oh my gosh, it is just the worst, the worst. And it's like nobody cares, man. Nobody cares about this kid. He's not lovable. Nobody cares about what's going on. I mean, it's just, how can we show our space guns and shoot people and chase and stuff? And it's just, it's one of the worst shows ever. Okay, so before I change subjects just a tad, because I don't want to leave it on total negative note, I want to talk about maybe at least one movie that, you know, hit all the highlights for you to make it a good movie. Because we did say I wanted the main thing to be so bad it's bad, not so bad it's good, like what ruins a movie for you. But I do kind of want to contrast that, you know, kind of like why you put a diamond on the back of a black background, you know. So I want to talk about one of those diamonds out there. Before I do that though, is there any other point or anything you want to bring up that's maybe on your mind, or an example of a bad movie?
Well, no, just I guess if I had to make one last point on the topic, I would just say, like, especially with what you were just saying with originality, you know, I don't know exactly where it started, except other than it started in Hollywood, I think, you know, but with it seems like it started in the horror genre in the 70s to 80s when they started doing sequel. You know, you have how many Jason movies, how many Freddy movies, how many Halloween movies, you know, and then so I don't want to say it's horror is to blame for that, but the fact that those sequels had so much success, I think really, and not saying they're critically good movies, because most of them are so bad, but they're like some of the worst movies ever made, or some of those later sequels. But I think that it started there, and the problem was it worked for a while, and then you started getting, you know, cookie cutter movies, and even up till today, some of those, you know, cliches are still being used in the movies being made today because they haven't gotten away from it. And that's another reason I got into some of the more foreign films, because some of them weren't as affected with that movement and stayed either true to their like original formats. Like, you know, the French still make really good noir movies. You know, they kind of stuck to that format. Koreans make really good thrillers, you know, Japanese make really good, you know, everybody can make, you know, any kind of movie, obviously. And, you know, Korea, obviously, and Japan, and these countries have a wide range of really good movies from every genre. But it seems like the ones that stuck to their roots and kind of what they were really good at and didn't stray away from that to chase the money seem to still be making better movies today because of that, because it's kind of naturally progressed instead of kind of got stuck in this box, this cookie cutter box. But yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. And but moving on to, you know, some of the good movies, something that because this hits almost all the markers for me, there's two movies that come to mind, and I kind of bunch them in the same category with each other, is Big Trouble in Little China and Total Recall, because you know, you've got space and you've got Chinatown, you know, you've got two completely different settings, and you've got Kurt Russell, who was an action star, but also a good actor. And you've got Arnold, who's just this, you know, so these movies are different in a lot of ways, but in the ways that they're alike are in the reasons why they're good to me, because they were really original in their time. I really like the visual effects that they use, you know, the props. Instead, you know, before CGI was getting really good, they were using robotics still, and, you know, silicone, and I think that works a lot better in these, you know, types of movies. But mainly the originality and the directorial work. You know, you have one that's directed by John Carpenter, you know, so one of the all-time greats. But those are two that really stick out to me because they really hit pretty much all five if I were to go through that, I'm sure, but also the sixth one we brought into it, which was originality. So and then obviously you have in terms of just overall pictures, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I think is a perfect movie. I think it's one of the only 10 out of 10s. Just hits all the, you know, checks every box. But in terms of horror, I'd say Suspiria from 77 is one that's really good, but it's kind of got that modern vibe because it's, like I said, that full circle. It's kind of those vibes that we've gotten back to, the A24 feel of horror, which I enjoy. I don't want it to be the only kind, but I enjoy it. And Police Story is another good one because I think that with Jackie Chan in '85, because I feel like that one was one of the first times they decided, okay, we're going to make this action movie, with these crazy Jackie Chan stunts, but we're also going to add a really compelling story and political philosophy into it. And it's Jackie Chan was already big before that, but I think that's the one that, especially for American audiences, really was like, okay, this dude he's awesome. And so I think those are some of the biggest movies that I can think of that pretty much check all the boxes for different reasons, but I think they're all pretty, solid films.
Yeah, really good, very good films. Thrashpondo, what's a film that kind of bangs on all cylinders for you?
Well, I'm going to have to ride on Deryk's coattails here and open with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Here's a movie, talk about a great storyline. Here's a movie where it's more of an opera than an actual film. There's actually about 5 completely different chapters with the same characters more or less throughout, but it's just these different adventures, really. And the main story, the quest for the gold shipment, that really doesn't even kick in until the first hour. Here you have 2 people literally on their own, and their interactions and their chemistry is so great that you're carrying the entire movie before we even introduced to the plot. And I think only Clint Eastwood and I always forget the man's name. The guy who played Tuco.
Oh,
goodness. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, the interaction between the 2 of them is so outstanding. I mean, crying out loud, it's The Good and the Ugly, and all we have so far is The Good and the Ugly, and we're still riveted. And then, of course, Lee Van Cleef comes in, and he is the consummate villain among villains. All 3 of them are bad guys.
Yes, even the good. That's what I think is so funny. Even the good is this terrible, terrible person.
No, he's a homicidal maniac.
Yeah,
He has redeeming qualities, but they were rooting for him. Heck, we're even rooting for Tuco at a certain point. Oh, and another thing, even some of the side characters managed to steal the film for their little vignettes. The Union officer in charge of taking the bridge, the alcoholic who's just tired of the war. That whole segment with him is riveting. He literally steals the movie in his little segment. Angel Eye's enforcer. He was actually a pretty good bad guy as well. He's this really underwritten character, but he sort of manages to keep a presence of the whole movie. It's a 10 out of 10 for me as well. If I had to go with another movie, I want to mention one thing though, just getting back to what we were talking about before about how lack of production value and special effects can still have a good movie. I want to throw one out there to you guys, and it's one that I reviewed on my content channel. It's called The Idaho Transfer. It was directed by Peter Fonda, who of course is better known as an actor than a director. And it was based on the sci-fi short story. He read it, he fell in love with it. Long story short, in the not too distant future, an organization working on meta transfer discovers time travel. And it's limited time travel, but time travel nonetheless. And they go into a period not too far into their future and find the world has been destroyed by some type of, extinction event. And they're trying to come up with a plan to sort of rebuild civilization, being hamstrung by government officials trying to pull their plug on the project. And it had such a small budget. The only actor in the entire film is Keith Carradine. Everyone else, most of them, the main character was a waitress in a coffee shop that Peter Fonda used to frequent. A lot of them, it was made next to a campground. And they actually went into the campground and recruited some of the younger folks to have small parts in the movie. That's why a lot of them are there for a couple of scenes and then conveniently disappear. There was a lot of what they used to refer to as guerrilla filmmaking, where they would just, show up, film a few cool-looking scenes, and then disappear. There's one scene where there's a train stopped on the tracks, and they run out, they film the train, and then incorporate that into the plot. You know it wasn't there to begin with. You know they just sort of added it because this will be a cool subplot. And I thought it was innovative, it's interesting, and it had a twist ending, which I guarantee you won't see coming. And I will not spoil this one. So I'm going to throw this out as a really excellent film with literally very, very limited production value.
And what was the name of that one?
That one's called The Idaho Transfer from 1973, directed by
down.
Peter Fonda.
Cool.
That sounds amazing.
It is. I have a review of it on my content channel. Not to plug
I'll
this,
check
but
that
I
out
will.
too.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I don't want to get too cliche because Empire Strikes Back is probably, I think, hits on a 10 out of 10 on about everything that you could possibly think of. But Star Wars is an easy one to do that with. So, real quickly for me, one of my all-time favorite shows is The Crow, the original one. That one is one of those 10 out of 10 originality, great story, great acting, good action. Everything that you could like about a movie is in that, and that that's in that 70s to 90s, those categories. There are more that are really great, but then they got one point that you couldn't give them a real great great review, but that's one for me that's like a top 10. Just awesome.
That's a good movie.
A little bit out of the one that I wanted to talk about was The Prestige. That's one of my favorite movies. It is a tad predictable. It is a tad predictable at the end that you can see that these two people are really the same person, like right before the end. But as far as but not really. I mean, it's just a tad predictable. But other than that, I thought that was brilliant storytelling, where you're basically reading the other person from their journal. I thought that was great, but that gets us a little bit out of the confines of Gen X. But okay, so those would be my choices for 10 out of 10.
I'm going to disappear real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Well, while he's gone, I just want to read this into the record. Eli Wallach played Tuco in The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. That just popped back in my head. And apologies to Mr. Wallach. You were great in that movie and pretty much everything else I've seen you in.
Okay.
It was killing. If I couldn't think of that, it was going to drive me insane.
Yeah. Well,
it's not that far of a drive.
Hilarious. Well, if I can get back to the cliche is the cliche of The Empire Strikes Back is just one of my all-time favorite shows. I mean, just really one of
it's
my all-time.
Possibly my favorite of the original franchise. Possibly. I'm a little on the fence, but I'll put it this way. There's nothing about it that I disliked, and I can't say that about the others.
Well, did you like A New Hope better or what?
I did. I love The New Hope. But talk about cliche. It was a very formula work. Now that formula worked great, but it was a very formulaic work. Empire Strikes Back was not. They threw us curveballs. There was some things I didn't see coming. There was more of Darth Vader, who I loved. Mm-hmm. And we saw him as a three-dimensional villain as opposed to a two-dimensional villain, which again I loved. I loved the love triangle aspect of it, even before I found out that one of them bordered on incestuous. Elephant in the room.
Right.
And the fact that he loses the arm and has to repair it. I mean, he's finally made a warrior sacrifice.
Right.
Now, granted, he makes a warrior sacrifice at a time where it's an easy fix, but he still makes a warrior sacrifice. So I'd have to give it to Empire.
All right. Our final segment of the show. I don't know. Were you able to think of a video store memory? We've all shared. I have a whole podcast of 45 minutes of me talking about some amazing video store memories myself. And Thrashpondo shared his. You're our guest today, and as often as I can remember, due to the fact that there is only one blockbuster left in America. And due to the fact that you're actually old enough to have gone to the video store, make that Friday night thing. Deryk, as our guest, as our special guest, please tell me one video store memory story before we close out the show.
Okay. Mine isn't as much of a one particular story as it is, many goings to the video store. I was born and grew up and still live close to Ada, Oklahoma, which we had a Blockbuster for many, many years growing up. And we would we'd go at least 2 times a week, just as I'm sure a lot of families did at that time, and go through the movies, the old, the new. My favorite thing to do was to start either at A or Z and just look at everything, look at all the covers, read what they're about, which ones came with commentary, because I was a weird child and I like to watch them with director commentary and stuff like that. And so I guess it's just the fact that, and there was an employee that worked there. There was this lady that worked there, and she had long red curly hair, I remember. And she was so friendly, and she knew us. Every time we came in, she knew us by name. And I still see her in town, even though, Blockbuster's been shut down for years. And every time I see her, I'm just, flooded again with all those memories of shuffling through all the VHSs at Blockbuster and, just checking out all the different new releases. But I guess if I had to pick one movie that stands out to me as one that I picked up at a Blockbuster, and I can't remember which one it was. Oh, it was a Steven Seagal movie, Hard to Kill. And
yes.
It was the first movie I can remember me and my grandfather and my papa picked out when I was, so young. It was like the first adult action movie. I don't know, like 4. And he's just like, yeah, let's get this one. And so that one sticks out to me. A lot of those old Seagal movies do, even though they're so bad, just because of my grandpa loved them. He loved them.
Yeah, good story. Good story. There's so many, not just Blockbuster, but Hollywood Video and all those independent ones that we've said goodbye to, and we really said goodbye to an era. And so I like to have people share with us about, their memories of that basically gone by era, and gone by kind of quickly. All right, Deryk.
It was over so fast.
Oh gosh. Deryk, tell everybody where they can connect with you online.
All right. Well, I do have a Facebook page, an Instagram, and a YouTube, and they're all under Flicks, Snacks, and Knacks. You should be able to search, that just about any way. I think it's pretty long enough and original enough that, it should be the only thing that comes up if you search those things. But I just do movie reviews. If you want to watch some short movie reviews, I do plan to start making some where I break, some of my favorite movies down to talk more about. So if that's what you're into, make sure to check me out.
Yeah, check them out. And guess what? It's free to subscribe. It's free. And it
just
helps
for
people
y'all
out. Yeah, it helps people out.
That's my Jake from State Farm price.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
You got the red shirt.
Yeah, it's the great rate.
Thrashpondo, as always, people can connect with you at
my content channel. It's Thrashpondo, but second word, Pons. Capital Pons. I do reviews of vintage film and literature, old sci-fi preferred, but I've also had some great traction lately with a series I'm doing on the top 10 worst jokes ever conceived of. Yeah. Mostly dad jokes, but some mom jokes as well.
They're
Please
funny.
check them out.
Nice.
All right. And actually, we are going to have Deryk with us, I think, on the live stream. I think we kind of booked you for the live stream this Monday, where if you want to ask him questions, head on over to Retro Serial, where you'll be able to see the thumbnail and click on that. It's going to be at 6:30 Mountain Standard Time, and then you can figure out what time that works for you in your time zone. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Ian C. You've been watching Retro Serial. If you are listening to this on podcast, please give me a thumbs up or give me a rating and review. That's right, a rating and review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. and share it on your favorite social media. And if you are willing to part with some of your hard-earned cash to make all my wildest YouTube mogul dreams come true, you can meet me on Patreon, where we have our tip jar and our cornflake club. And coming real soon, there's going to be special content to our Honeycomb Hideout Patreons, where you'll get exclusive material only. It's only going to be available there. And I think that's it. Yeah. Hey, everyone, until we meet again, stay retro.